Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Fully Managed. Thank you, Justin, so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the invite.
Of course. Thank you so much. So, today, as usual, we are going to start with a game. I like to personalize these games for each guest, as our listeners know. So, you are having a very catered game to you and your likeness. So,
Exciting.
this is what's going to happen. This game is called The Beautiful Disaster. So, um, I'm going to give you a bunch of scenarios, and you are going to choose whether you are going to let it burn, which means embrace the chaos and make it
Mm,
a part of your brand,
okay.
or fix it in post, which means control the narrative, clean it up a little.
Okay.
That's so good? Okay.
Yep.
All right. First scenario is your campaign goes viral, but for the wrong reason.
Let it burn.
Let it burn. What would
Definitely.
can you give a little more context?
Yeah. People love characters, not brands. Characters make mistakes. People make mistakes. You earn trust by making mistakes and then apologizing or making up for it, or sometimes even just distracting people if it's a tiny mistake that didn't hurt anybody. So that's how we feel about things. Don't panic under the spotlight. Just start dancing.
I definitely agree with that. That's a great that's a great quote to put in. I
Uh,
really like that. Okay. Next scenario. A client insists on changing your entire tagline 2 hours before launch.
Fix it in post. In other words, yeah, we'll fix. Yeah, we'll change it, and then you make the thing, and then you change it to what it was. But once in a while, a client may have a great idea, so that happens a lot. Um, Mickey the Mouse was called Mortimer the Mouse, and Walt Disney's wife, said that's a great character, a terrible name. You should name it Mickey. So listening to feedback is not a bad thing. I know sometimes the ego gets in the way, but sometimes I've had clients have great ideas. So a change at the last minute can be adapted to. Let's just put it that way.
No, I agree. I mean, that's crazy. I did not know that he was originally Mortimer. That's crazy. I would not have resonated as well. I
Yeah.
definitely think that Mickey's a bit more catchy. That's a
Hmm.
good example. Okay. Next scenario. Your intern, I don't know if you have interns, but
I
it
do.
just theoretically if you do, accidentally posts a blooper reel instead of a polished ad.
Let it burn big time. Interns are sometimes thrown under the bus, but if an intern makes some mistakes, that's why we have them here. I, I
Hilarious.
mean, I tell my kids all the time I make mistakes. And my kid told me he was upset about something he sent to a friend he thought was embarrassing. And I said, I make mistakes all the time. He's like, not like that. I said, I named my company Shitshow. And they started laughing. So,
No, that's a it's a really I think it's a good lesson when you make mistakes and on top of it I think that even an unpolished blooper doesn't really sound like
oh, yeah,
something to
that's the other thing. A blooper's a good idea.
bloopers are fun. I think people enjoy them. I think like they like seeing when people are human and they enjoy kind of stuff like that. So even if your brand is super polished, I guess like maybe it goes against the grain that you've kind of paved, but at the same time, I think that it shows like humility. So I agree with
Yes, mistakes are fine. I mean, I heard that the study showed that if a waiter or waitress makes a mistake and then they correct it and apologize, they get a better tip than if they don't make a mistake at all.
a lot of sense. I wish that they would get good tips regardless. But I understand because it seems like, like you really care when you own up to something that you do
Yeah, and
wrong
you
rather
don't
than
blame
like a
the, no, they always blame the, which maybe it is their fault, but I don't like when they blame the chef or the cook in the back because they're supposed to be a team, you know?
Yeah, it's funny though. I have worked in some some restaurants with some angsty chefs, for lack of better phrasing. So
Wow.
some a lot of the time it is the chef.
Oh,
But
confirmed. You're the inside story right here.
oh, confirmed. I've met more chefs with anger issues than any other person, any other profession alive.
Wow.
But it is you know, they also they really take care of their staff, I think too. Like I got some delicious meals made for me, but they don't care about the customers. That's I mean, it depends
Yes.
on the person for sure.
Hmm.
But because they're not seen, they don't have the
Right.
responsibility of getting the
Yes.
feedback.
I hear you.
But anyway, okay, I'll give you one last scenario. Okay. I'm trying to think of which one I should give you. Okay. Okay. You accidentally, this is like a real mistake, I would say, I guess. You accidentally mix up a competitor's logo in a client deck and they see it.
I guess fix it in post. I would apologize, but yeah, just be upfront. Whoops, we messed up. Let me use an
Whoops.
example. I don't know, Steph Curry on the Warriors. He was going to sign with Nike. Nike presented a presentation with another player's name on it. And worse than that, they didn't immediately apologize.
Oh God.
They fumbled their way through the presentation. It was clear this is before Steph was an MVP or won a championship. It was obvious that he was like a third tier athlete. And so right then and there, his dad and him said, we're signing with the Under Armour. So it wasn't the mistake, it's the lack of owning up to it or your general vibe that you
Kind of.
don't care.
Mhm.
Accountability. Exactly. Because maybe
Exactly,
the
yeah.
person had an intern do it or somebody else, or that doesn't matter. I mean, he has to own up to it and make that person feel like $1 million. Because obviously it's not about the money. Nike was going to give a lot of money, and Nike's a global brand. He wanted the respect. He wanted to know he was first.
I definitely understand that. I think also when you take accountability for a mistake or an action, the you get more control of the situation in which you get to like dictate the narrative almost. Where if you don't acknowledge it at all, then you kind of just like everyone's opinions about you become the narrative. Like
Yeah, the rumor
everyone's opinions
spirals.
about it.
Exactly. That happened with Cracker Barrel. They could have immediately said, whoops, we released this a little too early. They could have said that within hours, but they were panicked and didn't know what to do for 4 days. And it spiraled in a million directions why they possibly made that move. It became a whole conspiracy. The story became about the conspiracy supposed that was invented and not just, oh, whoops, we messed up. People mess up all the time. It's okay.
Yeah. No, I think that this is a great honestly, I think this game is a great starting point to introduce you fully.
Hmm.
Well, one, thank you for entertaining me. And also for so like you your agency name started as a joke and now it
Right.
drives a movement.
Hmm.
What moment what was the pinnacle moment when you realized the joke became your brand's biggest asset? And like how did it change your mindset?
That happened after very quickly after I posted this Onion style article called Embracing the Chaos Shitshow Creative Launches. And it was a ridiculous, absurd article. It even said hashtag parody. It had a picture I made in ChatGPT in like 10 seconds of three smug founders in front of this modernist office building in Venice, California. For some reason, I thought it has to be Venice. And I went on a walk with my wife and our dog, and then I come back and the thing has 100 reactions and comments, and I get an instant message from a guy from Perth, Australia, and he's asking me for a meeting. He says, I'm in Venice. I want to swing by. I think we should collaborate. And that's when I realized this is real because I think I accidentally scheduled a meeting with the international advertising executive. We, and that's was shocking to me because I had a big call to make because for the past 9 years I had said I was from San Francisco on LinkedIn because I began my career there. I had my kids there. I met my wife there. I lived there 10 years. All of my contacts and most of my clients are there. I was getting paid the rates from San Francisco. I'm living in Fort Lauderdale. I don't want people to think I'm a Florida man with an emotional support iguana and a crocodile in the backyard and a bad meth habit. So I had to come clean to the world and say, I am a Florida man. I was afraid it would destroy my career and like people would pay me less money, but instead I think they appreciated the self-deprecation of just owning up to the joke, telling people what happened. I mean, I tell everybody I was pretending to be somebody else and live somewhere else, and now I'm free. Liberated, and that's when it became a real company. Within 2 days, I had a client, and the rest is history.
I think that's wonderful. I think that, and that's exactly what we were just talking about is like owning the narrative because like there was a chance and maybe, I don't know how long you were doing it, but like there was a chance that someone did find out that you were not in San Francisco and got really mad
Yes,
about it,
and then I
like
lost it. Yep.
and then like that crumbled of like someone saying you're like doing something fraudulent or like blah blah blah, like, and then there's other narratives of like what else is he lying about, and it's like you being able to not only poke fun at the situation but also just be honest with like current clientele, like possible future clients, whatever it may be, is just like owning that is really valuable. I think like people see that that's transparency and they like trust you more.
Yes. People love the process, I think, of making art, of opening a restaurant. My friend opened a restaurant, but he started a blog showing all of the ups and downs and the money wasted and the mistakes and the construction that he did himself, like going to the flea market to buy this old angel that he painted gold and he called this place the Fat Angel. And his place became very successful. It was the first restaurant he opened. And then Conan O'Brien and the founder of Google and all these celebrities would go to this place. And I think the success of his businesses is he shows what's behind the curtains. A lot of people like to hide that, but I did a campaign one time for ballet in San Francisco, and they told us that they had noticed that the backstage pictures of the ballet artist with like bloody feet and bruises and tape around them would have 10 times more engagement than these beautiful shots of them on stage. And I think people realized they felt like they got to know the people, they felt behind the scenes. Even more than that, it showed the reality of ballet. It's basically a brutal sport. As painful as football, or even more so. Probably more so. There's no padding, hardly. And people love to see the unfiltered, raw truth of of people they either admire or people they follow. Or I mentor a lot and teach a lot. I like to show them the ups and downs of creativity. I think they get too much negative, right? And I like to tell them, yeah, there is negative, but by the way, it's different negative than you've heard. Like the problems that you'll find are probably different than the things that you're anticipating. And tell them about the good things. And yeah, if you want to know about a job, if somebody tells you about a job and they tell you all the bad things, you still want to do it, that means that you're probably meant for that job. If I tell you all the
You sound that bad.
yeah, if I tell you the honestly bad things about advertising, you don't want to do it, it's not for you. Because when you're meant to do something, people tell you not to do it, and you're like, I'm still doing it. That's supposed to be how it works. And I told my niece I was encouraging her to get into advertising because I think she has a gift for it. And she asked like, what's the hardest thing about it? And I said, you have an idea and you really like it, and then you tell somebody you pitch it and they don't like it, or you can't do it for legal reasons or whatever. You got to come back with another and another and another. And that's the difference between anybody can be creative. A creative professional is a person that comes back with better and better and better. And somebody that's feeding their family or buying food based on their creativity is different than somebody that has a great creative idea. Sometimes people who aren't creative professionals have great ideas because they're not attached to it, because they're not feeding their family with that money. Those ideas should be welcomed. It just must be remembered that there's a there's a difference between having one idea or having 1,000. It's like it's like an amateur baseball player can hit a home run once in a while, but try ripping triples on a regular basis.
Exactly. There's a certain kind of person for to like flourish in a position, and you kind of have to understand the realities of it going into it to really understand if you could thrive in it. And like sometimes you'll find out on the way that maybe that's not right for you, even knowing those realities or thinking you can handle something that you can't. Um but I think that putting more truth out in the world about what something really is really really necessary. Like I love this podcast for the reasons of like I like talking about and bringing up people's mistakes and what they learned from them. And I don't mean to like I'm not here to ridicule you. I'm just here to like understand that and like put that out in the world because people for the longest time I think specifically with agencies there was like this weird secrecy going on of like this is like how I grew my business from this to this and that was like and there's just this structured way of perfectly doing it. And like that's not true. Like there's bumps in the road always. Like people make mistakes. People like unexpected things happen in your journey all the time. Like there's highs and lows and
Yeah.
making it seem like there's only highs is just a lie or a really great coincidence, a really lucky coincidence.
So many years ago on This American Life, they had a Valentine's Day episode. And instead of making it about, everybody says, how'd you meet? They made it about how'd you stay together? And it was about an American who met a Chinese woman in China, and they didn't speak anything of their own language, and they fell in love pretty quickly and got married. But that was the easy part. How did they stay together for 15, 20 years? And how you meet doesn't tell anything. How you stayed together tells very valuable information. So how did you start the agency especially when you're called Shitshow is a natural question. And it's understandable somebody would want to know that. But if somebody might get more out of asking, how did you react the first time somebody had a negative opinion to it? Or how did you react when you were ghosted? I mean, that's the biggest problem for me is it's not being turned down or rejected. It's not hearing. Because when you're turned down or rejected, sometimes you get good feedback. And you can take it or you can leave it, or you can say, I disagree with that feedback, but you have feedback. Maybe you notice a trend in a certain kind of business isn't going to work with Shitshow. But when you're ghosted, you know nothing. And it's become an epidemic now with hiring, with candidates. I mean, how valuable is it to be, you don't get 10 jobs, but then you have feedback. That's how it used to be. And now it's not. So that's an example of an unanticipated problem. Nobody told me the hardest thing about opening a business isn't getting ejected. It's nothing. By the way, it's the same in comedy. Before people start doing stand-up, they think the worst thing that could happen is getting heckled or booed or people not laughing. I did stand up for a while, and the worst part of stand up is being empty. When you're first starting, you're in these bars and there's like three people, and a lot of times there's other comedians. And by the way, you probably shouldn't listen to their feedback because they're either cynical or they're jealous or they're distracted. More likely, they're distracted thinking about their own routine. Fair enough. And that, by the way, I would compare it to surfing. People think the worst part of surfing is like crashing or sharks. The worst part of surfing is when the weather doesn't allow you to surf and it's flat. So I used to compare surfing to stand up, that the thing I got exhausted with stand up was not bombing. I mean, that's not the worst. The worst thing about stand up is chasing the wave, so to speak, and trying to find rooms where you can tell your jokes. You'd be honored to bomb because at least you got feedback. That didn't work. Let me move on, you know? It's valuable for anybody.
I think that like well, speaking of comedy because that's a big part of like your whole brand. Comedy and narrative play a big part in your philosophy. How do you use humor to not just entertain but also connect with audiences?
Well, in comedy, a lot of times they say, after ha ha comes aha. And when you tell a joke, it opens up a part of the brain, and then you tell a fact after it or a point of view, and it enters your brain and it makes you think, or it gets you to see another point of view for a second. And I talked to a pastor about this, and he said, "Did you ever notice?" Because he tells jokes. A lot of pastors tell jokes, and he said, "Did you ever notice after I tell a joke, I deliver the message?" So he was confirming he does it by instinct. Maybe he saw other people do that, but now it's neuroscientists can look at your brain and then see that it lights up in a certain way when you're laughing. You're breathing. You know, breathing inspiration literally means like breathing in, and you're breathing, and then you're receptive to another point of view. And the best comedians are they don't have a set point of view. They get everybody to open their eyes to something they don't want to admit. And I've seen the best comedians, they're dealing with the right-leaning and left-leaning audience, and they play them like an orchestra. And in the end, you realize we can all laugh and see things from another perspective. And we're all equal because he's roasting both of us. I saw Sebastian Maniscalco is one of my favorites. I saw him in a big theater right as we were emerging from COVID. And he was playing the audience like left and right so beautifully. And having done stand up for a few years, I realized how difficult that was. He was basically orchestrating a concert. He was a symphony conductor. And that is not for amateurs. Because you easily could have the whole audience mad.
Yeah. No, I think that's I like with comedy that I think and I believe this is that as long as you're not punching down, you kind of can always win like any kind of audience. For like I think that people like to feel catered to with comedy, like they can connect to you, but I think that you have the ability to connect with anyone. Comedy has the ability to connect people that have like completely different moral viewpoints or ethical viewpoints, and I think
Yes.
that's like one of the coolest things about it.
One of the best shows I ever went to was at an Elks Club, and I went with three other stand-ups. And it was in the suburbs of San Jose. And we came from San Francisco. So San Francisco is 90% left leaning. You go to the suburbs of San Jose, it gets interesting because it's more half and half, especially in an Elks Club with an older, mostly white audience. And we were wondering how it was going to go. And it went amazingly because there was tension. Because comedy relieves tension when done correctly. And you could feel it in the room, and the people were laughing at each other, and they were turning to each other because they probably argued about these things before. And now there's a comedian not creating divisiveness or creating tension and leaving it there. You create tension and you relieve it. And then it happened that the closer, the guy who was with us, he's great because he does a stand up that's like partly motivational, and he'll even talk about it's so rare that we get in the same room together. We need to do this more often with people who see things differently and just laugh. And we're all humans and we're on this planet for a short time, so let's just have fun. And he weaves that into jokes, and I was really inspired. And I saw that comedians can be motivational, they can be they're kind of like a therapist or a it sounds pretentious, but some of the best comedians are modern philosophers. And I'm
Not
sure, by the
pretentious
way,
at
the
all.
philosophers has probably been lost. It's been lost in history or translation, but I bet you Plato and Aristotle were funny. Because anytime you challenge, you punch up. That's so unexpected that you're like, you just said that? I mean, that's the court jester making fun of the king. Um, you're like, oh no, you did it, and then you're laughing because you thought the same thing, but the words came out of their mouth. And sometimes I have calls with people and they say, from all around the world, like Brazil or Pakistan or India or Australia, they say, you say what I can't. They're saying that, and some have just said it. I'm a middle-aged white guy, straight, and I can say things and get away with things that they think they can't. But that's the whole point about being an ally. They tell you should be an ally, but I never realized it could be so much fun. I mean, how much fun is it? I was always the kid in school that would get mad or ticked off if somebody's making fun of my friend way more than me. And I would roast the person doing it. Way more than if they were doing it to me. Honestly, I would be a little bit like shell shocked. But if they're making fun of my friends, I feel like that now. And by the way, I've had this issue at jobs where the boss can throw me under the bus and I'll take it. But if they throw a subordinate of mine that I'm managing under the bus, it's very difficult for me to keep my mouth shut because as a manager, part of your job is to protect the people under you and shield them from unfair criticism. It's your job to give constructive criticism. When somebody comes in with something that's not even true and somebody's trying to blame them. So to your point about the funny thing about like don't punch down, it's good advice, it's ethical advice, it's the right thing to do. It's also just great comedy advice because it's not funny. I mean, some small people will think that's funny to punch down, but that's not the way to go. And
Probably not great people.
George Carlin's one of my favorites, and he would only punch up. I love Anthony Bourdain because rest in peace. Because have you ever heard the story about how he defended the small town reporter who wrote a rave review of the Olive Garden? I think it was.
Yes, I loved that story. That was so wholesome.
Yeah, he was so good at Anthony Bourdain was perfect example because he was so merciless, is that the word? Merciless?
Yeah, yeah,
Merciless?
yeah, yeah.
With the powers that be, with the politicians, with the hypocrites, with the pretentious business owners, with people he disagreed with. But he never did that with the common person. He invited her, right? I think he helped publish her. He shared her story. He opened people's eyes too to the fact that if you're from one of these small towns, that is cuisine. Like that is the best that you have. And it's not her fault she lives in a bit of a food desert. And by the way, maybe it's a novelty. Maybe they eat a lot of farmers markets food. Like I know my family and they loved Subway when Subway came to town. And it's crazy because some of the best subs are from central Pennsylvania and they would like this fast food. And I realized it's probably not about the food and that it tastes good. It's like, wow, like this franchise thinks we're a real city, you know? A little bit.
Something about it.
I don't exactly know why, but I've read that Gen Z is big fans of chain restaurants and you can see it in the data. And one of my thoughts was maybe that a lot of these independent type places are starting to look the same because of Instagram and they're becoming very cookie cutter. So if you want a cookie cutter standard experience, why don't you go to a chain that specializes in that rather than
Same
pay a
exact thing with
premium
time.
for Yeah, exactly. I think that has to be a factor. I went to a coffee shop in Lisbon. It looked just like New York or just like Fort Lauderdale, or just like I've heard Sydney or pictures of Asia. And I miss the kind of dusty old coffee shops that have that plush furniture and some old book. I don't know how many of them are around, but I was visiting my friend in Buffalo, and there's a place called The Spot right next to Starbucks. And this
I
place, The
think I
Spot,
know
has
exactly what you're
comedians,
talking about.
musicians,
I
all
was
of
in
those
Buffalo recently.
flyers. Wait, have you ever heard? I wonder if it's still there. Do you know what I'm talking about? That place? I wonder if it's still there. Gosh, I hope so.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure I know
Um,
what you're talking about.
And so Starbucks now is having all this trouble because they want to be the third place. I understand the CEO wants to bring it back to it's not work, it's not home, it's a third place. I get it, but third places kind of have to happen organically by a company that's probably not publicly owned because you have to do things that don't necessarily help the bottom line. Like I was really bummed when Starbucks got rid of the New York Times, and it was the only place I read a real newspaper. And I noticed other people reading it, and I'm sure they're like, we can save this much money by getting rid of the New York Times. But it was a signal, stick around a while, hang out. Even if you didn't read it, it's like, we want you to be here.
I
And
think that there's, oops, sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
No, what were you gonna say?
When a place has some random old book, I'll just open it up and read it that I never would. And I'm thankful that it's telling me stick around a while. And even if I don't, I feel welcome. So I went into a coffee shop in San Francisco and I just lost my job. And I was kind of firing myself up. Oh, I get to go to a coffee shop and work from there and do freelance and look for jobs. And I go to this coffee shop and I go to the counter and it's obviously a hipster indie coffee shop with $8 coffee. And I buy my coffee and then I say, I had already bought the coffee. I said, what's the Wi-Fi code? He says, we don't have Wi-Fi. Is that going to be a problem? Here's the crazy thing. I look around, everybody's on their phones and on their laptops. Why? Because they just use their mobile hotspot. So this pretentious jackass has an attitude that I'm going to ruin the vibe of a place where everybody's on devices. If I looked around and there's classical music playing and nobody's working, I would have put my laptop away and gone talk to somebody. It would have been awesome. It was just insane to see that. So there's a place. You ever go to Denver? So if you ever go to Denver, go near the ballpark in lower downtown, Loda. There's a bar there called My Brother's Bar, and it's right next to a ballpark. It has no TVs and they play classical music. And it's been around probably 80 years. It's in that book On the Road by Jack Kerouac, which was written in the 50s. So he stops in Denver at My Brother's Bar. It's still around. And it's cool because sometimes creative is taking something away. So let's have a sports bar with no TVs or sports. I've heard that the crunch is like, what if we had a gym but it didn't have weights? I don't know if it has weights, but they're missing something. I
There's
forget if
clubs
it's
that don't have like you have headphones on and you listen to music on there
yes.
instead of like on stage. That's something kind of taking something away.
There's also sober. That's become big, right? In the middle of the day, you go to a rave and it's sober. And a lot of people, I mean, I know a lot of people in that scene. A lot of them are sober, or a lot of them love the music and the dancing, and the music itself is a high, and they don't need it. And it's really cool that people are uniting around shared interests. And it's so crazy that the news makes it like a bad thing that Gen Z's not drinking as much. This is insane. It's like, shouldn't we celebrate that? And by the way, the reason they're not drinking, a lot of it is because they saw their parents and their parents' friends were shit shows. And they don't want to be like that. And it's bad for your liver and your health. So just have a gummy once in a while.
Exactly. Well, so we are approaching time, but I do want to ask you something before we go. So be just because I think that with the nature of your agency, there's just like a lot of advice that I think that you can kind of give that maybe someone in a different place would not be able to. But so like brands often fear looking messy. And like I think that's
Right.
why sometimes people try to brush things under the rug or not take ownerships of mistakes or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What is your advice to clients who worry about like losing control? Like how do you help them flip that fear into like creative?
I would remind them they never had control to begin with. Control's an illusion. It's irrational to think that we control our brand. The brand lives in the minds of the people who go there or the people who want to go there. And they forget that, right? Every company eventually forgets we don't own our brand. We have a brand guide, but nobody cares. You know how I worked for PayPal for a while, and they're like, people see us as a payment company, but we're more of a financial consultant, a partner, or whatever. And I'm like, well, you're called PayPal.
I like that.
Yeah, like the name is that's an issue. And by the way, that's a big thing. If you're the number one way to pay people in the world, you might want to stick to that. That's pretty good. So I've noticed that just like funny people want to be taken seriously. Serious people want to be funny. Um, a, a cola brand wants to be a lifestyle brand. A lifestyle brand is probably like, maybe we should come up with a cola or a brand, like, are we just a lifestyle brand or should we make a chocolate bar? Everybody wants to be something they're not. I worked for an agency called Crispin Porter Bogusky, which was one of the best agencies for decades. And I noticed they had this simple trick, and nobody wrote about it or anything. But they would take the brand and they would rewind 30 years. If a brand's been around 70 years or even 6 months, they probably stumbled on the right idea. And they just got away from it or they cluttered it up. So Burger King had Have It Your Way in the 70s and maybe early 80s. And then all of a sudden they dropped it for decades and decades and they changed every 6 months. They changed people. They changed it. They changed their campaigns, tried everything, threw spaghetti against the wall. It comes to the hottest agency in the world. And you have to get over your ego to do this. And what do? They say you had it right 40 years ago. Let's do Have It Your Way. They said Burger King invented mass customization, the idea that a huge global company can say, you make the choice. Because you could go to McDonald's and say no pickles. I don't know if it's urban legend, but they would spit on your food. I don't know if they do that, but they definitely don't invite you to do that. And they kind of give you an attitude. So you just take that old idea, redo it in a modern way. Boom, done. By the way, Pepsi, free idea for them. Choice of the next generation. They had it right in the 80s. Everything they did was modern. They did not allude to the past or to retro or to comforting. Coke has all that. Fine. You do the opposite. Celebrate creators like individuals. Coke is doing AI right now. What do? Don't do AI. Do the exact opposite. Maybe get 100 creative people around the world to do something inspired by Pepsi. The choice of the next generation, which by the way, doesn't all older people want to be part of the next generation or identify or spiritually connect with that? So that's the thing. Get over your ego, embrace embrace what's proven. It's not risky to go back to your core. And by the way, as a human being, it's the same thing. If you're like, if somebody says, be truthful, be yourself, step out of your comfort zone, people may be scared. And you're like, if you remind them, it's less scary to be yourself because you don't have to wear a mask and waste all this energy pretending you're somebody you're not. And nobody's going to call you out for being a fraud. I've been called a lot of things in the last 6 months, but I haven't nobody says you're faking it or this isn't who you are or something. That's the only insult that would get to me is if they said it and I realized they were right. But other than that, I feel like everything bounces off of me right now.
So you suggest like leaning into what you actually are rather than what you want to be, especially like with clients even so like for example, if your clients believe something about your like you find that as a whole they believe that you are something that you inherently don't believe you are, and like maybe it actually is a misconception. Do you think that you should still run with it if your clients believe that and go with that brand that like they kind of created for you?
Oh, you mean me as an agency or them as a? Are you talking about a
I
client
guess
that wants to?
in general, as like maybe not you specifically, but say like your clients have an interpretation of what you do, but it's maybe a misconception. Like maybe it's not
Well,
necessarily fully right. Do you still believe that you should lean into that?
that's a good point. Let me be more specific. Because here's what I thought about is right now I have a comedic brand and it's fast and loose and experimental. And we created memes about Cracker Barrel that went crazy nuts viral because we weren't criticizing Cracker Barrel. We made Cracker apparel, clothing, and we had Biscuits Are Bipartisan with celebrities and AI who were great friends, but on the opposite sides of the political divide. And that thing went nuts. So we have that comedic punk attitude. Like just make it. Just don't think. But here's the thing, we have another division that just launched, which is a very high-end, elite level, A+ style studio, Hollywood style content. We just launched that last week. So we got Shitshow Creative, which is a collective, and then we have SSC, which is a film studio. And this is attention because will people take us seriously? They're definitely laughing. They have been for 6 months. Will they take this seriously? So this is a risk for us. But I think all great ideas, all great brands, all great stories, music, paintings have tension. So in painting, it's light and dark. Music, it's major and minor chords. Shakespeare had comedy and drama. The comedy relieves you and allows you to be more dramatic. And the drama gives you a reason to make a joke once in a while. So it's not an either or thing. You can't have too many sides to your brand or you're all over the place. But I would encourage the client to do two things. You want to modernize yourself? Your Cracker Barrel? Let's do it. Let's modernize yourself in the Cracker Barrel way. We don't abandon what we had. For example, you could have made a campaign of that old guy on the Cracker Barrel, old white guy, and brought him to life as a character. Maybe he's like having a little trouble letting go, but he decides like the next generation is ready, and he passes the baton. And it shows thoughtfulness that he is respected by people. People do look at him as comfort, but it shows thoughtfulness to recognize that he isn't relevant to people who are in their 20s or teenagers that never went on their road trips and stopped there, never ate there, don't have that connection. I think that generations can be more empathetic to each other. It'll lead to us laughing together, sharing stories, and inspiring each other while we're here.
I think that is a wonderfully wholesome note to end on because it was actually really perfect and encompassing everything that you said thus far. And we are approaching time, so this was absolutely so wonderful. I had a lot of fun talking to you today, so thank you so much for joining me. To be able to talk about comedy and like not taking yourself too seriously and owning up to mistakes. I think these are all lessons that any entrepreneur could really learn from, or any
Yeah.
person could really
Don't
learn
don't worry
from.
about screwing up, especially if you're new, because what do you have to lose?
Yeah, you're
Especially if
just
you're
learning.
young, what do you have to lose? And if you know what, when you're old, you really don't have a thing to lose either. So it's really in the middle where it gets difficult. But whether you're an old established brand or a new one starting out, be yourself, embrace yourself, and take risks now while it's easier or more
Thank you.
fulfilling.
Thank you so much for saying that. And thank you, Justin, for joining me today. This is absolutely wonderful. Thank you for taking the time to come on. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'd be nothing without you. I hope that you can check out Justin and Shitshow Creative in the description. Thank you so much and have a lovely day, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everybody.